is a small town in the middle of the Sahara Desert, little but sand as far as the eye can see. Regan, written into the history books for all the wrong reasons, the site of the first ever French nuclear tests. The Saharan Centre for Military Experiments was built there from 1957. By then, Algeria had been officially part of French territory for more than a century. Well, the first test of a nuclear weapon took place on February the 13th, 1960, codenamed Blue Jerboa after a kind of desert rodent found in the area. The explosion 4 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. It was, though, just 50 kilometres from the town. Despite that, the French authorities trying to reassure. Let's listen to France's defence minister in 1960.
All precautions were taken so that neither the populations close to nor the populations distant from the site of the explosion were exposed to any danger. The successful results from the security measures put in place for the first 2 explosions in Regan were noted by the French authorities and confirmed by American and Indian observations, and guarantee the effectiveness of the measures which have been adopted.
The tests continued, this time underground, 600 kilometres further south in the Hoggar Mountains. 13 more tests right up until 1967, 5 years after Algeria's independence. A clause in the Evian agreements, which put an end to the war, authorised France to continue using the military sites. Well, almost 60 years after independence, the tests remain one of the main disputes between Algeria and France. Algiers still waiting for Paris to decontaminate the nuclear sites and to compensate the victims of radiation. The survivors, yes, but also the inhabitants of Regan today, who continue to suffer the consequences of radioactivity. Meanwhile, here in France, former conscripts who performed their military service in Algeria, trying to have the radiation they suffered during the tests recognised. Already some compensation has been granted. Well, Karim Yayawi and Soundous Brahimi revisit Regan for France 24.
The desert stretches as far as the eye can see. Barbed wire fences off an area where no human can live. Radioactivity has become an invisible enemy. Just a few hundred meters away, ground zero of France's first nuclear explosion. Our team took all necessary precautions and could only visit the site for 15 minutes.
ليميت نتاعو ديجا في الحدود نتاعو من هنا بدات لا كونتاميناسيون قد ما زيد قدام لداخل قد ما زيد تطلع شوف شوف البلاصه هذيك كحله بزاف نوار.
À cette tâche insolite au milieu du désert, à ce décor lunaire, à ce cercle de 800 mètres de diamètre de sable vitrifié et noirci.
يطلع كي نهبط لا صونت هكا نورمالمون يطلع يستنشقها الإنسان ولا يبتلعها، المهم تبقى لداخل في الجسم تاعو.
60 years on, the zone remains extremely radioactive. Abderrahmane Boualali worked for the French military during 4 of its nuclear tests here.
رانا منسية القضية هذه تماما، منسية تماما. نحبوا المسؤولين تاوعنا الله يعمل مولانا ينصرهم. في الوقت الحاضر ينوضوا يقوموا بالصح ويحاسبوا فرنسا اللي راهي دارت أكبر جريمة في العالم.
Regan has become forever linked to France's nuclear tests. A vast base was built for that purpose, just 7 kilometers from the town. Some 6,500 French people and 3,500 Algerians came to the region to construct it. Abdallah and Salah worked as handymen and drivers.
درنا اجتماع كما العادة كما قالوا لنا على 5 وعطونا أمر من عندهم قالوا وقت نقولوا لكم سقطوا على الأرض واجعلوا يديكم فوق عينيكم يعني مثل لا الشمس ولا قمر كما قال.
نهار 13 فبراير القنبلة بتنوض وباش يعني نعطيكم واحد توصيات لازمكم تنبطحوا وتغمضوا عينيكم تغمضوهم وتنبطحوا عندنا هكا ونطلوا فينا الفضول عندنا نطلوا شنو هذا الشيء وما القوار يبكوا ومغطيين بالكوفرته مازال زايدين الكوفرته.
The two men distinctly remember the explosion that morning. In 1960, the French government was well aware of the effects of radiation on humans and the environment, but authorities sought to be reassuring, saying there was no danger. An official line, repeated by the wife of the base commander at Regan.
Vous vivez avec vos enfants, donc pour vous, il n'y a pas de notion de danger.
Ah non, il n'y a pas du tout de danger. Et mon mari, justement, avait tenu à ce que nous soyons là au moment de l'explosion pour bien prouver qu'il n'y avait aucun danger.
Il n'y a aucune appréhension.
Aucune appréhension, non.
Gérard Delac was also in Regan during Jerboa's Bleu, the code name for France's first nuclear test. He was completing his mandatory military service at the time. Weakened by several bouts of cancer, it's hard for him to speak. He has shared his experience widely, and his wife has supported him in his fight. She knows his story almost better than he does.
He had 30 operations on his face. You can't tell because the plastic surgery hides it. He had cancer on his lip in December. In 2020, he had 4 operations on his face, on the chin and the lip. You can see the mark here. He worked as a driver, so a few days after the first explosion, when he was on call, he was asked to take another officer to an undisclosed location. The officer showed him the way. They went to the bomb crater to plant the French flag at ground zero. A helicopter flew by above them and asked them to leave. When they got back, they were decontaminated. His hair was radioactive. When he returned to France, his hair fell out by the handful.
Monsieur Delac, aujourd'hui, vous êtes en colère après les responsables ou...
Yes.
But at the time, he was proud.
At the time, we were proud.
Proud to have served France. It was part of France's grandeur. But today we feel as though they've forgotten us. They claimed it wasn't dangerous.
They used us.
Gérard Delac was one of the first to be compensated by the state after years of tireless efforts, largely led by the Association of Veterans of Nuclear Tests.
People write to us telling us about what they did, about who they contacted. This is the story of someone who is in Eka. Here, in Polynesia. And there, in the Sahara. Thanks to this, we are able to progress.
Over the past 20 years, the group has launched successful media and political campaigns, becoming the government's chosen intermediary. In 2010, a law passed making it easier for victims to be compensated.
Ce ne sera plus à la victime de prouver que sa maladie est liée aux essais nucléaires, mais c'est à l'État qu'il appartiendra de contester ou de contredire cette affirmation.
Compensations have been more speedily disbursed since 2019, but the group says its fight is far from over.
We are currently working on several issues. Firstly, to ensure continued recognition of victims. We're working to expand the number of recognized illnesses. We're also examining the issue of descendants, as we are convinced that the illnesses have been passed down. We are conducting a study on victims' children. We are demanding that all victims be recognized as such, including the spouses,
who cared for their husbands who became widows, and the children who had to live through all of that.
Dozens of French victims have been compensated, but only one Algerian has, even though the law covers those living in the Sahara. Victims from Regan could file a claim for damages, but most don't know they can. Those who do are often rebuffed for lack of documents or evidence. Many residents here are convinced that the nuclear tests are at the root of their problems.
عطيت واحد 7 سنين ولا 8 سنين وانا قاعد نبدا ساكن لازم محل نمشي ورحت للعين تاع البودا ونمشي فيها النية وليت فيها نوقف شوياك ونتعلم نمشي. احنا نهار اللي جاو قالوا قعد انتم ماكم حيين هنايا حيين كذا نسبقنا ما راه وخشين عندكم هنايا ما راه وخشين عندكم هنايا اي ما راه وخشين طيب ما قلنا احنا ما بقى فيك مرة كاع ايوا انا حيين اخويا ومن عاد تلم في الناس كل
العمر نتاعي 18 سنة راني نشوف الحالة نتاعي راهي قدام عينيك يعني اللي في الليل في أي لحظة توجعك الجلادي مشينا للرقان مشينا للأدران مشينا لأي جهة زرناها ما كاش دوا نتاعها.
I spent 10 years of my life in Tamanrasset. During this time, I noticed that there were high rates of cancer in the region, particularly thyroid, breast and skin cancer. I didn't see this as much in the north. Apart from cancer, there are also high incidences of deformity and orthopedic disorders.
France carried out such tests in the Sahara in preparation for a potential nuclear war, no matter the human cost. The government at the time, however, denied the danger.
Je crois, mon général, que les expériences de Reagan n'avaient pas un but essentiellement militaire.
C'est tout à fait exact. Le gouvernement français, en effet, a tenu à ce que ces expériences ne fussent pas seulement utiles dans le domaine militaire, mais encore dans le domaine humain, en faisant des expériences pour savoir dans quelle mesure l'homme pouvait être protégé contre ce danger nouveau, qui est le danger atomique.
For Jerboa's Verte, France's last atmospheric test, the military brought in German tanks and French troops who had been stationed in Germany. This to observe the effects of radiation on the machines and on the men. Christian Courel was one of them.
We turned the tank around so that it was facing away from the bomb. Our 5 tanks were there, and then a raging fire. For a few seconds, we heard a noise. Then the tank, which weighed 44 tons, moved back 2 meters. They asked us if everything was okay inside. Afterwards, they asked us to operate the tank to see if it was radioactive. To the left, to the right, reverse, straight ahead. We did that for 2 or 3 hours. Once we got out of the tank, they had to decontaminate us. Personally, I feel anger towards de Gaulle. We were nuclear guinea pigs. We were just completing our mandatory military service. We weren't paid like other military professionals.
Ah bah toujours, oui.
Yes, I still don't understand it.
Je comprends pas ça. Enfin,
I would like to know if my friends died or not. It saddens me.
Ça me chagrine ça. Si jamais vous passez
Maybe if this story goes public.
As it finished atmospheric tests in Algeria, France looked to new methods. In the Evian Accords, it successfully negotiated for the possibility to continue tests underground, even after Algerian independence. It did so in the Inekar Mountains. The tests were presented as less dangerous, but in some cases they did do harm to the local community. The military documents remain classified, making it difficult to obtain proof.
I want the files to be unclassified. Algerian and French history are intertwined. They acted hastily and created a big mess. They had to bury radioactive engines in Algerian soil. We have their planes, their tanks, boats, pieces of artillery. We have the right to demand a plan for disposing of nuclear waste. France must cooperate and contribute financially to scientific research. It's true, many people think Algerians just want money, that they're greedy. We're not greedy. No, we are not. We want reparations.
The Regan region was contaminated by the nuclear testing. In certain zones, it will take 24,000 years for radiation levels to start falling. At the beginning of 2021, the sky over the French city of Lyon turned a rust red. More than 60 years on from the tests, radioactive particles containing cesium-137 were found in France, carried on strong winds from the Sahara, as a stark reminder of history.
Karim Yayawi and Sundus Brahimi revisiting Regan for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition. Of course, you can catch it and the previous editions as well on our website. That's at france24.com. More news coming up very shortly. Thanks for watching.